My name is Nina, and I'm a big emo piece of shit.
Yay!
Hello there. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You look amazing today. So 2020 has been fun, right? We all love it. It's great. I'm personally thriving. I haven't been too lazy to touch up my roots, and everything's great. As someone who planned to go into the music industry after my graduation, which was in May and totally virtual, it's been a little bit of a crazy time. Don't really know what I'm doing with my life, and it's just made me reflect a lot about why I got into music in the first place, which was really early 2000s emo. When I say emo, I'm really talking about like Hot Topic, like insane eyeliner, coon tails, hair kind of emo, like the embarrassing emo. That's what I'm talking about. It's the embarrassing emo. My life revolved around like My Chemical Romance, going to the mall, and Warped Tour. You know, it's the roaring 20s. The only thing that is good about this year is making like Roar XD jokes. Let's lean into it. It's something that I am excited to talk about. I kind of want to go through the history of Warped Tour, from the way that it revolutionized the idea of what we know as a festival today, to its sort of like crashing and burning, or not even crashing and burning, it just kind of fizzled out. Kind of just stopped working, and we'll get into it. So what is Warped Tour? Okay, so Warped Tour was a traveling rock tour, rock is obviously used here kind of loosely, that took place in the United States and Canada. It ran from 1995 to 2018, with a few scattered stops in 2019 for its 25th anniversary. It was known as a punk rock summer camp, camp rock, if you will. Every summer in those 25 years, the 60+ bands, the thousands of vendors, tech people, crew members would pull up to a new city, unload everything from the trucks, set up an entire, basically small functioning city of a festival, have the show, take all of it down, put it back in the trucks, and start it all over the next day. It was honestly a huge feat. It had never been done before at this point. It felt like a rite of passage for bands and fans alike. I mean, it was kind of grueling. It was exhausting. It was hot as all hell. Who am I? Am I 80? It was hot as fuck.
My skin is sticking to my skin. I feel like the Wicked Witch of when I'm melting. If that makes any sense.
It was also exhilarating and so exciting and just like so expansive. Like as a kid, getting to experience this like tiny pocket of like a music wonderland, the biggest, most exciting thing that I had ever been part of at that time in my life, when I was 14, 15. And it was accessible to me. The way that Warped was set up in terms of bands was also really cool and unique at the time, because they would not announce any of the band's set times in advance of the day, so it was impossible to plan ahead. So it basically led to this frenzied morning of, as a fan, I would wake up, I would pack a little backpack with like sunscreen and like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because the food there was like crazy expensive. Then I would stand in line at like 7 in the morning, and when they opened the gates, it was like a flood of people would go to this big inflatable marquee thing in the center, where they would post all of the band set times and locations for that day, and it was always totally unique to the day. I would always be super prepared and like have a little notepad, like a little reporter, like a little Nancy Drew, and I would write down all of the bands, the set times, the stages, and also any like events that I wanted to go to that day, whether it be like a signing or, you know, whose merch I wanted to pick up, or etc. Sorry guys, my cats were yelling. Don't you just love being in here with me now? So Warped Tour was sponsored by, you guessed it, Vans, but there were also a multitude of other like companies that had their names plastered on everything throughout the festival, from water stations to tents to like this weird inflatable bouncy castle thing that Trojan had with like condoms flying around. It was fucking, it was an experience, a wonderland of advertising. We'll get to that later. So it was conceived by Kevin Lyman, who kind of conceived it as a punk rock festival, but obviously it branched out into countless genres over the years. And Warped Tour really was a jumping off point for artists at the time. Among a few Warped veterans are, you know, there are some bands you would expect. There's Green Day, there's My Chemical Romance, there's the All-American Rejects, there's Taking Back Sunday. But then there's also this like weird smorgasbord of bands that you really would not expect to have ever been on Warped, but here we go. Katy Perry in 2008, the Black Eyed Peas in 1999, BB Rexa in 2015, Eminem in 1999, G-Eazy in 2012, Jeffree Star during his horrifying music career in like 2008 and 2009, and even Pharrell's band Nerd in 2002. I've honestly never heard of this. I tried to find evidence of them online and I can't, but it's N-E-R-D, and Pharrell was in it, and Pharrell was on Warped Tour, and you'll just have to take my word for it because isn't that a really fun image? So other than this insane lineup, why was Warped Tour so iconic? So Warped was the largest traveling music festival in the United States, and it was the longest running music festival in all of North America. Something that I really want to touch on, because it is truly what I think makes Warped the most special, is the accessibility of the tour. You look at festivals today, it's a few $100s for a ticket. Coachella, Bonnaroo, Lollapalooza, you name it. At Warped, the tickets were usually somewhere between $25 and $45, and with that you had access to everything. If you wanted to buy merch or do some special workshop or something, it'd be a little extra, but really you just had the run of the place. And instead of having like crazy high profile VIP experiences, the whole tour was kind of like a Where's Waldo of your favorite band members walking around in the crowd. Like if you walked around long enough, you would probably run into like that one guy who was on your bedroom wall for a few years, take a picture. Most people were just super sweet about it. It was all there for you, which was especially special considering the age demographic of people there. When you're in high school, you don't have a few $100s to drop on a festival. But I would start saving up money to go to Warped Tour a few days after I'd just been the previous year, and I knew that I would be able to go. Like, it was accessible for me. It gave me something to work towards and look forward to that was attainable. It also served as a platform for a multitude of up-and-coming artists. When you were like right on the cusp of making it big, or even if you were smaller than that, getting on Warped Tour was a huge priority for bands because it was really such a valuable platform. It was getting to show your music to kids across the entire country and getting to be part of this like long hollowed tradition of up-and-coming bands. Getting to say that you've played Warped Tour was kind of like a badge of honor at one point. Kevin Lyman and the people behind Warped Tour made sure that there were enough avenues for these up-and-coming bands and artists to get their shot at being on the tour. Like for instance, every year there was a Battle of the Bands. It was called the Ernie Ball Battle of the Bands, and basically bands could compete to be able to play on their local date of Warped Tour, and they would get, you know, local support, get people to vote for them online. It was a huge deal for kids that grew up, you know, idolizing those bands. To be able to play is everything. Also, every year there was what's known as a barbecue band, which is basically a band that didn't quite make the cut to be on Warped Tour, but because they are the ones that are doing a whole barbecue for all the bands and the crew and the management, etc., they get a spot on the tour. So they would play all summer in exchange for being the little barbecue boys.
And you barbecue from 8 o'clock to like 11. So they did a good job. Kevin put them on a stage.
Is that a little bit strange? Yes. But also, apparently the Dropkick Murphys credit their start to being a barbecue band on Warped. So in my opinion, it's DIY at its finest. Warped Tour also made sure to spotlight music education every year on the tour. They would usually have workshops. In years past, there was a John Lennon bus that would be on the tour where it was basically a traveling studio, and they would have workshops where fans would learn about music production and music industry. They also had band happy workshops, which that was more recently. That was when I was going. And basically artists would sign up to give workshops on songwriting, performing, confidence, things like that to their young fans in a really intimate setting. And it usually only cost like $15 to $20. You would get like a copy of their CD with it, and you'd get this really unique, special experience. I may or may not have paid real human money to get a songwriting lesson from Christopher Drew from Never Shout Never, and we're not going to talk about that. To be able to be mentored by the artists that have made you want to get into music is invaluable. And another technically like really good idea, if we're going to pat Warped on the back right now, is the invention of the adult daycare, which is an air-conditioned refuge for parents who technically want to be with their kids at Warped Tour, but also absolutely don't want to be with their kids at Warped Tour. This isolated tent where parents could read a book, they could play a board game, they could like watch Jeopardy, pretend that they weren't in a sweaty parking lot with like Alisana playing like 2 stages over, you know? It was really nice because a lot of parents with kids that age, the Warped Tour age, would not want to send their kid out there alone. When it was first brought into the tour, the parents needed to buy a ticket for themselves as well as their kid. But then a few years into it, Kevin Lyman eliminated that cost, making it so that if the kid had a ticket, the parent could come in with them absolutely free, which is another point for accessibility. Warped also made sure to include some nonprofit organizations on the tour. They had organizations like PETA, Invisible Children, and even Write Love on Her Arms, that we all had a sweatshirt from at one point in our youth. So now we have to ask the question, who is Kevin Lyman? So Kevin Lyman was the founder of Warped Tour, obviously, and he was a former stage manager for festivals like Lollapalooza, who was really passionate about the hardcore scene and the ska scene, and wanted to bring that music to audiences around the country in a very grounded and unextravagant kind of festival. His primary past experience was a stint as a stage manager for Lollapalooza in 1992. It was part of the inspiration behind the big marquee with the ever-changing set times, because Lyman noticed that when they did announce all the lineup times in advance, fans would not come until later in the day because they only wanted to see the big bands, leaving very few people watching the opening bands. With his changing set times, it's genius. You come in not knowing if your favorite band is going to play first thing in the morning or last thing at night, and it really prompts exploration. You have to walk around with the free time that you have. You can end up stumbling upon an artist that you really end up loving. Kevin Lyman said that with his system of the changing set times, 90% of people going to Warped Tour show up when the gates open. Pretty genius move. A lot of 4D chess going on. So Warped Tour, when it was first conceived, was originally supposed to be called The Bomb, after, you know, the 90s slang term. But fun fact, right before he was gonna announce the tour with that name, the Oklahoma car bombing happened, and he had to like scoot out of there. So he ended up changing it to Warped Tour because he had worked for a music magazine called Warp Magazine, and it was just paying homage to that. So when Vans stepped in as the tour's primary sponsor in 1996, 1 year after the tour officially started, that's when it really solidified the tour as a hardcore punk rock scene. Vans at the time wasn't as like mainstream trendy as it is today. It was really a sports brand geared toward hardcore, rough and tumble California skater dudes. So much so that the first few years of Warped, they constructed full-size skate ramps in the middle of the festival, and people would just be like doing ollies or whatever. I want to be a skater girl so bad. I'm really exposing myself today.
Warped Tour is punk and ska and cool people and skaters. That's why we're here.
According to Lyman, the 1996 festival really established Warped as a credible punk festival. They had like Pennywise and NoFX headlining. They had cemented themselves as doing something very different and very targeted at a certain audience that wasn't being thought about. Also, fun fact, Calvin Klein was in the running to be the official sponsor of the tour, like the name sponsor, and their rep was gonna have a meeting with Kevin Lyman, but got stuck on a plane for 24 hours because of a huge blizzard. And the meeting never happened, and the rest is history. What a time that would have been, though. The 1996 Warped was a historic one. It featured 2 stages that the bands would alternate between because it was just a smaller festival, so they couldn't play at the same time because it would have been like majorly clashing noise. And like I said before, it featured skate ramps, and it had a decidedly more sports meshed feel than the more recent eras of the tour. In 1997, Warped one-upped themselves with a 3rd stage called Locals Only that was specifically for local bands to be able to, you know, show their talent and get in front of bigger audiences. And then I believe 1998 was the first time that they featured the rotating set times. They had 2 main stages, 2 side stages, and then 1 stage that was basically the Locals Only stage, but they renamed it to the World Warped stage. In 1998, the tour also expanded to include international dates. They had a Warped in Australia, and in Europe, and in Japan. They also had a few little offshoot events in the UK, Hawaii, Mexico. They even had a special Warped like Alaska event. In 2017, they even had a Warped cruise line. I guess it wasn't a cruise line, it was just a cruise, but it was called Warped Rewind at Sea. They had some like, you know, popular acts from Warped Tour playing on a cruise going from New Orleans to Cozumel, Mexico. So, okay, we've talked about the good, we've had some fun. Now let's talk about some of the things that Warped did wrong or that Warped was criticized for. First of all, there was definitely a lot of friction between what Warped Tour was doing and like seasoned punk veterans that criticized Warped for being stupid or superficial or just not fitting into their idea of the ethos of what punk rock was. For example, Joe Queer of the 80s band The Queers had this to say about Warped Tour. You play music because there's something inside of you that says you have to play music. Now you get bands like Fall Out Boy that are basically created in the studio. The Warped Tour changed it. Fuck it, I just don't like that shit. All the guys in the bands remind me of the jocks I hated in high school. To me, a punk gig is a small, sweaty club with the audience right in your face, knocking over the mic stand and boogieing off the energy. Real punk rock of you to say boogieing, love that. And then Keith Morris, who was in the Circle Jerks and Black Flag, said this: "These kids that are playing on the Warped Tour, they should have no choice but to go into the military and go off to some desert somewhere and spend some time in the desert, rather than having some big, ultra, mega record company giving them lots of money and paying for their hotels and buses, making sure their hair is trendy and that they're wearing the proper clothes that all the kids like and wear, all that fun shit." Fun fact, Morris's band, the Circle Jerks, would appear at Warped Tour in 2007. Look who has a big mega record company giving them money now. Stupid. There's also this contradiction between the punk rock ethos and capitalism, because Warped Tour, it was a traveling mall with stages. And I don't say that to undermine how amazing Warped was, because I am very far up its ass. Every surface was plastered with a brand name. You were getting handed out samples of things. Stages were named after different products from sponsors. The whole thing was an opportunity for brands to thrust their products upon young concert goers. Warped was one of the first festivals to really hop onto the concept of the festival as a marketplace. Today, it's a very typical phenomenon. I mean, every festival has brand sponsors, but back in the 90s, it was a novel idea. On the one hand, Lyman said that they needed all those sponsorships in order to make the ticket price as low as it was, which is fair. But on the other hand, I feel weird about the fact that some of my favorite memories are linked to products that I still remember the name of today, like the Kia Soul stage or the Honda Civic Tour, things like that, where they really are kind of taking advantage of the fact that kids are so emotionally invested in this day that they're gonna sort of subconsciously put their brand and their products in the back of your head whenever you access that memory. I've been watching a lot of cult documentaries, let's be real. But it is weird, right? An Adweek article in 2005 actually put it best when they said that the corporate edge of Warped Tour does somewhat undermine the legitimacy of the event, even as it introduces groups of men in tight pants to new audiences. So let's talk about some of those men in tight pants, especially how they were given so much access to young impressionable fans, and how Kevin Lyman did a very poor job of keeping his young fans safe from men in tight pants that may not have had the best intentions. There was Front Porch Step, who in 2015 faced allegations of misconduct with a number of young and underage fans. And when that came out online, he was removed from the tour. They kicked him off. But then guess who showed up at the Nashville date a few days later? It was Front Porch Step with a whole horde of bodyguards. He was back. He played that date after he was ostensibly kicked from Warped forever. And Lyman allowed this. This led to other bands protesting. It led to bands like the Wonder Years canceling their set for the day, saying that they didn't want to be playing the same tour with a man like this, a predator like this. It was a really big controversy. Let's talk about Slaves frontman and generally awful person Johnny Craig, who in 2015 sexually harassed a merch girl on Warped Tour and in a Warped Tour town hall, all the bands and crew voted to kick him out. I guess it's a pretty short story, but basically the Warped Tour town hall system is what happens when Kevin Lyman is faced with something that he wants the community's opinion on, usually a hard decision like should this person stay or go, and people can vote, which I think is actually a really good way to handle things, assuming that he does listen to their opinions and ends up actually taking action. In this story, Johnny Craig did something bad, he got kicked off the tour. Side note, one of my favorite YouTubers right now, The Cozy Representative, recently did a whole multiple part video series about Johnny Craig and his insane monstrosity of a career. It's a total rabbit hole and I suggest that you check it out if you're interested. I'll include the link down in the description. Okay, next up we have Austin Jones, who I'm assuming that a good number of you may have heard about because he got his start on YouTube. He's a YouTuber slash musician who ended up going on the Warped Tour in 2015 when Kevin Lyman was introducing the Warped Tour YouTubers collaboration, where basically YouTube was getting big and he thought that it'd be cool to have some alternative YouTubers go on the tour that summer to meet their fans. So Austin Jones was there in 2015 when it started to come out that he had manipulated underage fans to send him explicit photos and videos. It was a big revelation online, and YouTuber D-Fizzy, Damon, who was also on the tour at the time, really pushed back on Kevin Lyman about this. He really was advocating for Jones to be pushed off the tour because giving him access to more fans all summer would be insane, right?
That is fucking disgusting. I do not want to go on tour with this guy. I don't want anything to do with him. I don't want to be on a bus with him. I don't want him meeting my viewers. I don't want to be associated with this guy at all. But basically, I sent a whole email with all the proof. It was told to me that it wasn't completely like evil. It was just lame.
So what Kevin Lyman did was he accused Damon of being a bully. Like, stop bullying this.
This is an email I got from an owner of a music venue in Wisconsin that has association with the owner of the tour. They've worked together for 25 years, they said. You are a bully, the worst kind, an internet bully. And then the owner of the tour replied, Damon, I think you are starting to tread on thin ice. Be careful.
He tried to get Damon to apologize to Austin Jones. It was a dumpster fire. It was such a ridiculous situation. Lyman also asked the victims of Austin Jones to provide him with police reports before he would believe their stories, even though there was so much evidence online. That's how he got accused in the first place. Davi Vanity of Blood on the Dance Floor also played Warped Tour in 2011 and 2012. Yes, Davi Vanity, Little Mr. Kevin Hansen investigation. Recently his name has come up again because he's trying to get back in the scene under a new name. So if you see anyone under Dark Arts, please run in the other direction. He played Warped Tour in 2011 and 2012, and that was years after he had already been fully arrested for sleeping with an underage fan. And Kevin Lyman allowed it. So Lyman's response to all of these situations is one of frustration with the victims for bringing this up with him, and inaction in general. He's compared it to a witch hunt and mob mentality, I think because mostly all of the evidence for these allegations exists online, which I think that he deems to be less legitimate or valid. Basically, he just seems inconvenienced by the whole thing, and he only really takes action when people pressure him to do it. As a side note, a few other little weird choices on Lyman's part. He allowed an organization called Rock for Life, a pro-life organization, to be on the tour and hand out pamphlets, like really disturbing pamphlets to kids. Also, he allowed the army to recruit people at Warped Tour, which seems antithetical to punk rock at best, and just like manipulative at worst. Like it's just weird. It's like, you're never gonna convince me that Warped Tour is the right place to try to get people to sign up for the military. I'm sorry. In interviews, when he's been asked about this, he kind of spins these choices like, oh, I'm just like being bipartisan, but it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't jive with the demographic that he's trying to reach. Ultimately, Warped ended because the times were changing and Kevin Lyman just couldn't keep up. On the tour's second to last summer in 2017, the attendance had drastically dropped, especially in the 14 to 17 age range, which was really horrible for Warped because that was like their bread and butter was kids that age. But in the past few years, 14 to 17-year-olds have been flocking to social media sites like YouTube, TikTok. The kind of general taste of the mainstream has changed. It's just a very different landscape from when he used to be targeting an audience who was bumping All American Rejects on their iPod, especially with 14 to 17-year-olds who were discovering new genres and dreaming of bigger festivals. The luxury festival is what most kids will think of when they picture a festival experience now, or at the very least, they'll picture an endearingly grungy camping festival. Young people's current access to technology is also a big factor that Warped Tour kind of couldn't overcome. Now they have to fight for attention with Netflix, YouTube, TikTok, streaming platforms where kids can watch live sets from the comfort of their home or anywhere. And also with the environment today, I think parents are a little bit more hesitant to send their kids out into a parking lot with a bunch of strangers. Plus, production costs were rising and bands just weren't coming back like they used to. I mean, bands were called Warped Tour veterans for a reason. Certain bands, like, I remember seeing We the Kings multiple times at Warped, The Used. It was just something that bands used to really, even when after they got big, would keep coming back to because of the experience. And now bands have bigger and better offers from different kinds of festivals. So Warped Tour just didn't have the pull that it once did within the industry for up-and-coming artists.
Hey guys, Editing Nina here. I didn't really film an outro for this video, but thank you so much if you made it this far. I appreciate you so fucking much. Please let me know if you have any fun content ideas. I would love to just keep talking about like fun niche music topics because that is like my whole life. So yeah, thank you so much. I will see you in the next video. Bye.